Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my February wrap-up. If you haven't seen my February TBR video or my March TBR video, those will be linked up below, so you'll be able to see which books from February I read. I had a great reading month this month. I think there's only one book that I rated below 4 stars, so I read some great books this month and I am really excited to talk about them. If you are not subscribed, make sure you subscribe down below, and without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, the first book I read I do not have with me anymore because it was a library book. It was called None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is a mystery thriller book told through a podcast. Like, there's some narration, there's some podcast clips, and it follows a thread of it having been turned into a Netflix documentary. So like kind of unique storytelling. The premise is that there are these two women who have the same exact birthday, so they're the exact same age, and they run into each other, meet each other at a restaurant on their 45th birthday, and one of them asks the other woman, who's the podcast woman, if she can be on her podcast because something big is about to happen in her life. So she decides to go on this podcast and crazy stuff happens. I won't say any more than that because it's definitely a book that's better to go into without knowing too much about it. I think that the thread of this book was super good for a mystery. Like, sometimes they don't leave you enough breadcrumbs, and I like when there are some breadcrumbs. I didn't really guess what would happen in the end, which I love. And overall I really enjoyed it, so I would definitely recommend. I rated this book a 4.75 stars. But if you're looking for something like super fast paced, like I sat and read the last 200 pages in one sitting. Like, it's so fast paced, I enjoyed it so much, so definitely would recommend that book. Next, I read A Psalm for the Wild-Built and A Prayer for the Crown-Shy. This is currently a duology. I'm not sure if she's writing more in this series, but this is a fantasy sci-fi. I think people categorize this as cozy fantasy, but it's a little series by Becky Chambers. So I'll start with this one. So A Psalm for the Wild-Built is a story about a person called Dex. They live in this universe that is post robots. Like, basically in this world, robots have gained consciousness and have decided that they don't want to be a part of society anymore, and they go and live in their own little society. So everybody has their own profession, and one day Dex decides that their profession is not fulfilling to them anymore, and they go to become a traveling tea monk. And along the way they meet this robot named Mosscap, and together they kind of go on this traveling journey, and they talk a lot about the meaning of life. Dex is sort of trying to find their way in the world. Mosscap has been sent by its robot community to learn about humans, and so they're learning a lot from each other. And it's just such a beautiful, sweet book. And both of these are really quick reads. So in A Prayer for the Crown-Shy, it sort of picks up where the first book left off. More adventures, they're kind of exploring more of this universe and getting to know each other better. And it's very similar to the first book, just like more new plot. They read together really well. The audiobook is great. I would absolutely recommend these two. I think I rated both of them a 4.5 stars, but absolutely adorable, would 100% recommend. Next, I read Crying in Age Mart. If you watch my February TBR video, you would know that this is the large print version because unfortunately I accidentally ordered this in large print because it was the cheapest option. I've had this book sitting on my shelf for a couple years and I'm so glad I finally read it, and I actually ended up listening to most of it. I read maybe like a chapter, if that. The book is narrated by the author and it's a memoir, so it's like her story and her telling her story. If you've seen my videos before, you know that I love a memoir where the author is reading it because it's so much more personal. So anyway, this is the story of Michelle Zauner, who's the woman behind Japanese Breakfast. It's her life story, but it mainly focuses on her relationship with her mother and her mother's death from cancer. So definitely very sad, but it was interesting to sort of see how she grew up and see how her relationship with her mother changed from when she was a kid to when her mother was at the end of her life, and then to see her sort of start her music career and all that stuff. So I really enjoyed it. Would definitely recommend. It was really beautifully written. I rated it 5 stars, but it's a memoir, so like ratings for memoirs usually 5 stars, like doesn't really mean that much. But anyway, sad book, but it was very good. One of the next books I read was The Fury by Alex Michaelides. This is his newest novel. It was fantastic. If you have read The Silent Patient or The Maidens, you have to read this book, especially if you loved either of those. This one definitely gave me more Silent Patient vibes than The Maidens vibes. I don't remember either of them super well, but this one felt, I think, a little bit more than The Silent Patient, but it was different. So basically the premise is, you know, somebody dies, it happens on an island, and the narrator that's telling it is a playwright. So they're writing it in sort of like a play style. There are about 5 or 6 acts, sort of written in that vibe, and even though it's first person narration, he only self-inserts a little bit, so it's actually him writing third person narration, which is super unique, and then sometimes he'll step back and use first person narration to talk about himself, but when he's talking about all the other characters, it's talking in third person. The focus in the book wasn't on him, which I think was why it was interesting. So I won't say much more again because this is like a mystery thriller. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was really well done. It kept me on my toes the whole time. I had thought that I guessed what was going to happen at the end, and I absolutely didn't, and it threw me in a bunch of different directions at the very end. So super quick little mystery book, just like the other book I recommended earlier in this video. If you're looking for something fun, mystery, quick, definitely pick this up, especially if you enjoyed The Silent Patient. I think Alex Michaelides is now going to be like an auto read author for me because I just love his stories so much. Next, I read the 5th season trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. So I'll start with the first book, which is the 5th season. This was my book club's pick for last month, so I'm really grateful actually, because I don't think this would have been a book I picked up otherwise, especially even if I had picked it up, it was a little bit tough to get through. There's so much world building and just like a lot of stuff that you have to like wrap your mind around and imagine, but once you get to the end of it, it all like starts to make sense. Another unfortunate thing is I read a major spoiler for this right when I first started reading it. It didn't ruin the book, it definitely changed the way I read the book. But this book follows 3 characters in a world where every so many years they have this thing called a 5th season, which is like a really disastrous ecological event or something like that. This 5th season is like really, really, really bad. There's this group of people called Origins, and they have special powers, which I have likened to Earthbenders from Avatar because that's just the easiest way for me to understand it. Basically, they can manipulate Earth and they can sense things in the Earth, and that's the best way to explain it. They're trained at this school called the Fulcrum. I can't really say too much more. It's very clear that there is a lot of racial and ecological climate change related messaging in this book, which I think was done really well because it was definitely not heavy-handed. Like, it was very subtle. I found myself throughout this book so many times looking up fan art for these characters because I just was trying to like understand what they looked like, and nobody has done fan art. Unfortunately, I think it's a little bit too late for the series to be turned into a movie or a show because it came out in like 2015, 2017. I think it was optioned for screen, but nothing really happened with it, so it would be so cool to like see it visualized. But now that I'm done, I want to do like a deep dive on N.K. Jemisin's anything she said about the series, just so I can understand it more. But it was great to talk about it in my book club. So with that being said, I rated this one a 4 stars. I'm not going to talk too much about the plot in the second 2 books because I can't without spoiling anything. So this book follows 2 characters. The character that gets added in this book I loved. She was so fun, and it was so fun to watch her like grow up and learn new things. That's all I'll say. And also, now that I had understood what the world was all about, I found it much easier to read this book. So I rated this one a 4.25 stars. And this last book follows the same 2 characters. I think it finished the series super well. It did sort of fall into the trap of like, we're gonna just wrap everything up really fast at the end of the last book, and probably would have been better off if there was a little bit more like big plot points spread throughout the book rather than them all being in the last like 50 to 100 pages. But I think it did wrap up really well. And by the end of a series, I loved these characters, and it's such a unique concept for a world. Like, as I'm reading it, I can tell sort of where she's drawing from and her ideas, but I haven't read anything similar, which is fantastic. And I ended up reading this one 4 stars as well. If you love fantasy, this is a little sci-fi-y. If you like Avatar, if you like Star Wars, there's definitely stuff drawn from both of those. There's a little bit of Harry Potter vibes in here, so I would definitely recommend these series. I would recommend reading them as like a buddy read, because this is definitely a book series that you would need somebody to talk to about as you read them. But I really enjoyed them, and yeah, I thought they were great. Last book I have to talk about is called Ash by Melinda Lowe. This is the one book I read this month that I did not rate a 4 stars or above. I'm reading this for a video that's coming out this weekend, so if you are not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video. I won't say what it is, but you can guess. This is a Cinderella retelling about a girl who, it's basically Cinderella, except for instead of falling in love with a prince, she makes a deal with a fairy to let her go on this huntress trip because she's wants to be friends with the huntress, and then realizes she's in love with the huntress but has made this deal with the fairy, which is that she has to be in love with the fairy. And then the prince also is pining after her. I don't know. I feel like this author took the Cinderella story, added like sticky notes and footnotes rather than like taking the vibe of Cinderella and turning it into like a queer love story. So like, I thought it was cool because it was like a queer retelling of Cinderella. Like, she falls in love with the huntress. That happens in like 2 or 3 pages. Like, it was so anticlimactic, and I really did not enjoy it as much as I thought I would, which is kind of a bummer because I've read another book by Melinda Lowe that I loved, which was Last Night at the Telegraph Club. So this is one of her earlier books. This came out in like 2007 or something, so interesting to read backlist, but wouldn't recommend, especially if you're looking for a queer story, because this one was not one of those. I rated this at 2.75. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end of this video. Let me know down below what your favorite book of February was. I would love some new recommendations. And again, make sure you're subscribed if you're not. And I will see you guys next time. Bye, friends!